Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Frontline update for the 14th of January 2023. Let's get straight to the overnight news and other bits and pieces. I'll start as ever with the Ukrainian released Russian losses, usual caveats, accuracy, propaganda, no equivalent from the Russians, but I find these indicative. So 530 liquidated personnel, I guess sort of average considering the last couple of weeks, has been higher, has been lower. Tanks, that's how averages work. Tanks, armored personnel vehicles, so tank 6, APC 6, 4 artillery systems, 1 anti-aircraft system, 2 drones, 13 vehicles and fuel tanks. So there's an uptick there. I don't know what that could represent. And 2 special equipment, pieces of special equipment. Never quite know what they are, whether that is maybe a radar, just a radar vehicle or something like that could be. So I guess just fairly average. Yeah, don't know if there's too much I can say about those. Right, we have heard that the whole kind of Leopards thing is all being all over the news, very controversial. So Germany will make a decision on sending Leopard battle tanks to Ukraine in the next week. Berlin will make a decision before a meeting of senior defense officials from allied nations in the American air base in Ramstein. So the Ramstein meeting is this organization, or this organized meeting that happens every so often where they get together and decide what equipment should go to Ukraine. Now, there's possibly going to be some big announcements at this particular Ramstein meeting. Germany has just, well, they said they weren't going to give Leopards, then they said maybe, and then there's been this growing pressure because there have been now Denmark joining the Leopard coalition. So I think there's something like 9 nations saying, look, we will be happily give some Leopards from our stocks if Germany allow us to, because it all depends on a German export license. And at the moment, Germany is saying no. And in rather the same way, Switzerland said no to lots of their stuff being given, which is weird. But Switzerland are a neutral nation, but they're still happy to make ammunition and weapons for other countries. So you can, they're happy to sell them directly to a country. But when the country wants to move them on to another country, they say, no, you can't do that, because we're neutral and all this. Or you're like, that's just a bunch of double standards to me. Anyway, so throw into the mix the fact that yesterday the German, and she's always been a bit controversial, the German Minister of Defense has resigned, and that has actually been a fairly popular move with a lot of people. So you might start getting a bit of movement on decisions like the Leopard decision. However, I think Scholz, the premier in Germany, is perhaps, so he historically over the war, he's been one that's been hard to shift on some of these decisions. So I hope with the defense minister going there, there'll be some movement from the Germans, but it's not guaranteed. Just have to wait till Ramstein, I guess. Italy has given final permission to transfer the SAMP-T air defense system to Ukraine. That's been held up recently. That some people saying it's political, other people saying it's been more to do with like mechanical issues and whatnot. But actually, that's going. No, SAMP-T are really good. I think they've got 100% hit ratio in Ukraine, so they've done a really good job. Incidentally, there have been ballistic missiles overnight. I think there have been 3 explosions in Kyiv. Ballistic missiles are interesting because they're not used so much for these long distance strikes, but they seem to get through radars better. So that they have arrived in Ukraine without much warning. I don't know the details. They're just sort of filtering through now, so apologies about that. The Ukrainian defense minister has told the BBC in an interview that approximately 500 to 600 Russian fighters are being killed every day across Ukraine, while Ukraine is losing a tenth of that, so something like 50 to 60. And of course, that is coming from the Ukrainian defense minister. There's going to be probably some degree of propaganda in that, but you would assume that there's a nugget of truth there somewhere. And that is that the Russians are losing more than the Ukrainians, and that would be borne out by sorts of claims that we hear daily, and also the evidence we see from large-scale destructions of troop accumulations, so on and so forth. Now, going back to tanks, talking about the Challenger 2, Guardian's defense editor wrote last night in a pretty good article that was quite revealing that the British are expected to announce on Monday that they are going to give some tanks. Now, since that article came out, there's been further detail. I can't verify this, but British media reports that Sunak has decided to send 12 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. 4 are to be sent practically immediately, with another 8 to be sent later on. And that, again, will be formally ratified on Monday. So watch out for that. That might get the ball rolling with the Germans and their Leopards. Just to talk a little bit about these claims of Russians dressed in Ukrainian uniforms. There's a photo captured from a drone said to show a bunch of dead Wagner troops on the Eastern Front. The interesting thing is that they're wearing Ukrainian uniforms except for the white armbands. It cannot be verified. For instance, if the armbands were put on later or taken off or whatever. They are wearing white armbands. So the idea here could be one of two things. Either they are dressing in Ukrainian uniforms for perfidy, which is deception, which is a war crime. However, as some people have pointed out, these are mercenaries and they don't have to adhere to the Geneva Convention and so on and so forth. So there's lots of murky ground there. It could also be genuinely that the Ukrainian uniform is just better. It's just warmer, more protective maybe in some aspects, or able to carry more stuff. So the Russian soldiers, these Wagner mercenaries, perhaps convicts, are saying, like, we haven't got very good stuff here. Let's just, here are some dead Ukrainian soldiers. Let's have a bunch of their equipment. It's not to fool the opposition. It's just that, I want to survive and I want to be more comfortable than I am now. So there's possibly two ways of reading that. And judging by various reports, Wagner's successes in the Bakhmut direction force the Ukrainian command to adjust its plans in Zaporizhia. This is coming from a Mill blog that Rebar has recounted. So I would say that, this has been touted a couple of times recently and could well be true. There's been Russian claims about troop accumulations of Ukrainians into the Zaporizhia Oblast and direction for a long time, even in the southern Donetsk area and also up in the Svatove direction. Now, they could be readying themselves for a spring offensive, maybe in a month's time or something like that, or 2 months, who knows. Or one theory is that they were actually due to have done a winter counteroffensive. The ground is harder. It'd be sort of more sensible to do it at that time rather than spring, where you have heavy muds, and that they were ready to go or getting ready to go, but they had to redirect a bunch of troops to Bakhmut because Bakhmut was getting hammered. And there is definitely some evidence of this. Reinforcements have come in through Chasiv Yar, behind Bakhmut, into other settlements that supply Bakhmut. There is evidence that there have been extensive reinforcements sent there, and they have to come from somewhere. And the argument is that they have come from the potential counteroffensive troop accumulations in Zaporizhia. That wouldn't surprise me. But there you go. That's reported by Rebar there. Anyway, let's get on to front lines, starting in the northeast in our usual place. So we're going to go to Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna. And again, not a great amount of news coming out of many other places other than, of course, Bakhmut. As we go to my map, there's been, some general news as a result of Russian shelling with the MLRS. 2 women were killed and 1 was injured. In Dvorichna of the Kupiansk district, a 29-year-old man and 49-year-old woman were injured by shelling in the Kupiansk region, which is to say that they're using MLRS against Dvorichna here, and that there is generally shelling around here from the Russians. I guess that's nothing too unusual. The ISW reports that there are sort of Ukrainian counterattacks and Russian attacks going on sort of up and down here in the usual way. That we have Ukrainian General Staff reporting Ukrainian forces repelled assaults near Stelemkivka, which we have Defmon saying Stelemkivka and Makivka repelled attacks from the Russians. So Stelemkivka is here. And then as we come further down south, we get to Makivka, which is here. So Russian assaults around there. At the same time, Ukrainians have apparently been attacking around Ploshchanka and Chervonopivka and Kreminna. Ukrainian forces attempted to attack Russian positions near Kreminna. The Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces concentrated sizable forces in the area for an offensive against Kreminna. Of course, that's what's been said for basically several weeks. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that artillery elements of the 76th Guards Air Assault Division, that's VDV, they're the airborne troops, defeated Ukrainian assault brigades near Hrayarivka and Serebyanka, and that's south of Kreminna. The Ukrainian General Staff reported Ukrainian forces also repelled a Russian assault near Bilorivka. Okay, let's put that on the map. So as we come down south, there have been Russians repelling assaults from the Ukrainians around here, and also shelling around Serebyanka. The Ukrainians, as it says here, repelled a Russian assault near Bilorivka, which is here. But it's worth mentioning this from Rebar. The enemy command expects an offensive by the Russian armed forces in the area southwest of Dubrova. Personnel of the 90th Battalion, 81st Air Mobile Brigade of the AFU have been redeployed to the Lysychansk sector, which is to say that the Russians are saying that the Ukrainians are definitely going to be attacking from around here. So there's the usual fighting going on all up and down this front. And indeed, if we get to just coming into Bakhmut, just north of Bakhmut, we have Bilorivka and Spirna. So the Ukrainians repulsed attacks in the area of Bilorivka and Spirna. So as we come further down south, get to my map, Spirna again attacks around there. But we haven't heard so much of news around this area, so much activity around there, because it's all been about Soledar and, of course, Bakhmut. And we'll go there now. So a little bit of context to what's going on here first. Let's talk about Prigozhin and Russia. So Prigozhin has basically been pretty upset because he's trying to sell this as an entirely Wagner PMC mercenary victory in Soledar and all the gains as a result of Wagner, although it looks like it's a third Wagner, a third VDV airborne, and a third sort of LPR, Luhansk People's Republic troops. So that's controversial in itself. But he has claimed that the Russian media were forbidden from mentioning Wagner in their news reports. According to the Wagner boss, some officials in Russia who want to stay in their positions are trying to steal the victory in Soledar away from the Wagner group. So this has caused a whole load of infighting. PMC Wagner and Russian Defense Ministry are quarreling with each other in who has taken Soledar. I also noticed that PMC Wagner almost always hoist their flag and not the Russian tricolour. That's interesting. Remember, Russian oligarchs' greed is only outrivaled by vanity and jealousy. And this is reported as well in some quite a big analysis in the ISW daily report. Their headline is: the announcement sparked a significant backlash within the Russian information space due to the Russian MOD's failure to acknowledge the Wagner group's participation in the capture of Soledar. I believe you've now heard some props given to Wagner in the news. So I think there might have been some change from the Russian command structure to budge a little bit on this issue. The Russian MOD's announcement highlighted the existing conflict between Wagner Group and the Russian MOD, a dynamic that ISW has previously observed and obsessed. Prigozhin likely seeks to use victory in Soledar as a bargaining tool to elevate his authority in Russia. And then on the flip side, Putin may be taking measures to cultivate a cadre of mill bloggers loyal to Putin and the Russian MOD to undermine Prigozhin's effort to elevate himself. So there's loads of interesting machinations going on behind the scenes in the Russian information space. And that really can probably only be a good thing for Ukraine. You would want there to be an unsettled state of affairs in Russian military command. And in the information space as well. So, I mean, there's so much more I could say about that. I might put it in my extra today if I get a chance to do the extra. The other thing that's worthy of mention is that Prigozhin announced that Soledar was entirely captured. And this happened actually really early on. And it wasn't. And that then apparently annoyed a bunch of the fighters, Wagner working on the ground in Soledar, because then they had to actually capture it really quickly so that reality could then accord with what Prigozhin was announcing. And this caused some here the quote is, "It's a nightmare there now. The rush to announce a full takeover has led to the fact that one has to operate on the edge of what is possible. The Wagnerites are literally being pushed from behind. Everyone is being driven there. If Prigozhin personally has already announced a complete capture, then the price of the matter will no longer play a role. Losses for such a small section of the front are wild. If something does not work out with Soledar now, the probability is minimal, but theoretically it's there. The Ministry of Defense will use it against Prigozhin and the musicians personally. The supply of shells will not only not be improved, but reduced altogether." So in other words, there's this claim that the Russians are holding back supplies for Prigozhin so that he doesn't do as well as he's claimed he has, in order to undermine Prigozhin's authority and successes. I wouldn't be surprised if these commanders who reported to Prigozhin yesterday that everything has already been taken and there were only a couple of hours of fighting left, these commanders might well have been reassigned to the assault troops. Now the Wagnerites have to stretch out heavily and cross the river. At the same time, the MLIS and artillery of the armed forces of Ukraine have shot everything there. They hit like in a shooting gallery, and there are plenty of snipers there as well. Drones are constantly circling above, watching and throwing grenades. There is nowhere to take cover. Everything is an open space, and there's quite a lot of footage to support this. And the weather is such that if you're wounded in these conditions, you have almost no chance of survival. Even if you stop the blood loss, you will freeze. There is no way to evacuate from there. Everyone is dead if they get hit. And that's fascinating. And that has come from the Russian Telegram channel reporting a source likely within Wagner talking about the situation in Soledar. So that's a pro-Russian source reporting on the unease that's going on there. As well, to throw into the mix, there have been reports of a withdrawal. So the 46th Brigade, who at one point were claimed to be doing a counterattack, and then in other sources like they are withdrawing from Soledar, and so there's a lot of confusion going on. I don't know, I might have even said that as well. Well, it turns out there's at least one fake 46th Brigade source that had been set up by the Russians that was spreading disinformation, and that's now been found out, and you can now find the proper 46. There are three official sources for the 46th Brigade. But there are fake sources floating around, and you need to be really careful. As well, you've got Russian POW here that is seen to be wearing women's boots, and the understanding is that even those boots that he'd probably nicked from a house somewhere were better than the equipment he was given. So this might feed into understanding how the Russian troops have ended up in Ukrainian gear. And CNN have reported that there were, on Friday afternoon, appeared to be an organized pullback from Soledar with no sense of panic. So just to read you what they said, the CNN team just outside of Soledar reported ongoing mortar and rocket fire on Friday afternoon after Russia claimed control of the eastern Ukrainian town. The team, positioned approximately 2.5 miles from Soledar, witnessed Ukrainian forces ferrying troops out on Friday afternoon in what appears to be an organized pullback from the town. There did not appear to be a sense of panic among the withdrawing Ukrainian troops. So, with all that in mind, let's actually look at the maps. Okay, just a little thing. As I go to my map, I want to just say that I've got most of my mapping in this area from Russian mappers, because I think when the Russians do well, and this is exactly the same for the Ukrainians. So when the Russians do well, they're more likely to shout about them doing well, and they will give you the receipts for that. So like, look what we've done. This is where we are, and they'll scramble to tell their sources and the mappers and whatever exactly how well they've done. When the Russians are on the back foot and they are losing, they will tend to lie about it, and that could be the case for the Ukrainians, although I don't think they lie about not doing well. I just don't think they give you the information. They just keep quiet about it. So in this situation, you have Russian mappers saying, well, this is where the Russians are, and Ukrainian mappers begrudgingly sort of saying, well, it looks like they could be here, not 100% sure, haven't heard from this lot, haven't heard from my usual sources. And although I'm overtly pro-Ukrainian, as you know, I am also really interested in accuracy. So that's just to give you a little understanding of where I'm getting my details from. Let's look at, so first of all, Soledar, Ukrainian artillery teams are continuing to target exposed Russian units in Soledar. In the area, constant artillery battles continue over the town. Ukrainian special operations foiled an attempt of Russian forces to bypass the defenses near the town and force them into a retreat. So we have general claims of the Ukrainians repulsing attacks in Roslivka, Sil, Krasnohora, Pidorodna, and Bakhmut. Russians are attacking the western part of Soledar, which is Silj. Battles in Soledar continue, according to the Ukrainian General Staff. This is the War Mapper map, and you can see up there, this is the area that the Russians are currently on, according to War Mapper. I would say actually Russians control more area than that, and I'll show you on my map in a second. And these advances towards Krasnohora, I think they've got a little bit of purchase in Avdivka, and they appear to control all of Pidorodny, arguably, as well. So I think that's, as per normal, War Mappers either a little bit behind or a little bit charitable to Ukraine. Russians have taken most of Soledar, says Andrew Perpetua. There are unconfirmed reports that Ukraine still holds a hospital. Russia pushed forward units into Blahodatne, but from what I understand, they were overextended and didn't achieve much. So here's his map, and you can see Soledar coming up here to the railway line and to the road behind. But they didn't succeed too much just south of Soledar, and some claims that the Ukrainians hold the hospital. I think that's probably unlikely. So if we zoom in here, this is what I have, but this is basically on Russian mappers, so bear that in mind. Hospital is here. I think they've probably been cleared out there, and in fact only have a small amount of area just to the east of the railway line, going north to south here. And that there are claims now that this railway station in Silj is under Russian control. Sorry, no report says that concludes Soledar. Visual confirmation of Russian troops at the far northern point in the northeast of the salt mine. Ukraine only remains in control of Sil railway station and the suburb against the T-0513 highway. Russian forces are reportedly already attacking the railway station, and again, this is from yesterday afternoon. So there was possibly still fighting after that, 2:25, I think, local time. So there's a hospital under control of the Russians, according to him, and they are pushing out here. Ukraine is still in control of that railway station, as according to no reports, but that it was under pressure. Rebar says the enemy commander expects an offensive. Oh, sorry, that's what I was saying. In the Soledar sector, Wagner detachments are clearing the western neighborhoods of Soledar and underground routes. The Wagnerites entered Seoul and occupied the train station. So that's a Russian claim. There's fighting in Bakhmut and in its suburbs. Ukrainians lost control over several strongholds, and we'll get onto those soon because they're further down south. And this is the Syriac map. So pro-Russian, saying Russians began an assault to Sil sub-district west of Soledar and took control over a big part of the train station. So it could be that they own a controlled part of the train station. So that could be why you got a bit of confusion there. In addition, troops captured most of the fortifications north of Krasnohora and are trying to enter the town from this axis. So this map is rotated 90 degrees. So you got the north-south railway line there. And as you can see, right on the edge of the railway station there, and this little pocket here. And I've actually seen sort of wider mapping than that here, so this probably shows you better. So we go on back to north-south here. So you've got the railway stations seems to be on the edge of the controlled ground for the Russians, and there's a little sort of bridgehead to the north of that, little tiny salient as well. In towards Krasnopolivka, and further down south we have apparently a movement across the railway line into the very northwestern areas of Soledar. So just quickly what the ISW say. Russian sources claim that Russian forces captured the railway station in Sil, as mentioned, and blocked the settlement from three sides. Ukrainian officials stated that Ukrainian forces continued to defend Soledar, and Ukrainian drone footage posted on January 13th indicates the Ukrainian forces likely hold positions near the settlement. It talks about the CNN reporting, video report, that they are moving troops away, and that's reported from a Ukrainian trench roughly 3 kilometers away from Soledar. Russian forces are likely prioritizing stabilizing their control of Soledar before attempting further advances. The Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces have successfully cut Ukrainian forces in Dvorichia, 4 kilometers west of Soledar. I can't find that place, off from supply routes from Bakhmut and Siversk. Actually, I've just found Dvorichia. It's a suburb of Soledar. So this is, the success is around here. The claim is that this supply road has been cut, but that would have been under pretty much fire control for the last few days. So I don't know how usable this road is. But now they're saying it's cut. So that could be that all of these troops around here in that northwestern part of Soledar in Sil may not be able to be supplied, and that's obviously pretty troubling for them. But there are still lots of ways out of there, but it's just they can't get supplied from Bakhmut. And Russian sources claim that Russian forces are conducting assault operations on the outskirts of Avdivka, Krasnohora. Geolocated footage published on January 12th and 13th shows Ukrainian forces operating in Krasnohora, despite Russian military blogger claims that Russian forces have captured the settlement. So this is coming just down south. Repulsed attacks towards Blahodatne, Krasnohora here. I don't have that at all confirmed as controlled by the Russians, so that geolocated footage would confirm that it is contested and that they are trying to move in on Paraskevivka and Pidorodny. I know more information particularly on that. The only other thing I'm going to show you is this, and this has been going a bit viral. The first part, the guy that's produced this version, the first part is sped up because, what basically happens is that you see a whole bunch of Russian troops move into, so there's somewhere between 25 and 50 Russian troops move into this place with the green roof, and then just a little bit later it gets hit, possibly by HIMARS. There's lots of claims about whether it's different types of artillery, but that to me looks like it's going to be something like a HIMARS. And if that is the case, that's interesting because they're using HIMARS in the area on troop accumulations. That is a massive hit. Apparently between 25 and 50 died in that. So that's where the situation could be, that you have Ukrainians pulling out, but still heavily hitting Soledar with artillery and Gimlers, so that they are giving the Russians a hard time, that the Russians could still be having huge losses in the area. I don't know how widespread these sort of hits are, but I've given you a couple of claims of continued artillery assaults on Soledar, and that might include things like, HIMARS or other Gimlers. So that might change how we understand how well the Russians are doing in the area. It could be coming at a huge cost. And there's a really interesting discussion that I didn't read to you, but it was about, what is a definition of a Pyrrhic victory, and is this a Pyrrhic victory? I might do that in the extra video. Let's go further down south to Bakhmut itself. Anyway, as I said before, let's get on to Bakhmut Central. There are just repelled attacks all along here. No movement of the lines as far as I know. Pretty much the same as yesterday. So fighting on the eastern outskirts, fighting in Opitny. Claims that they control all of Opitny, and that's going to help them attack to around Klishchivka. Just unsure of the exact mapping around pretty much this whole area. Klishchivka as well, that they are repelling, the Ukrainians are repelling attacks around there. There have apparently been some gains to the south of Ozaryanivka. The ISW claims, geolocated footage posted on January the 12th indicates that Russian forces have likely made marginal gains south of Ozaryanivka. Former Luhansk People's Republic Deputy Interior Minister claimed that Russian forces are preparing for an offensive along the Predtechine, Belohora-Dilivka line. So there could well be an attack around here, around this sort of axis. And you could imagine that the Russians are thinking, right, we're doing really well north. We need to continue this pressure down south to get this larger encirclement. And that might include Chasiv Yar as well. Thinking forward weeks and weeks, this could be their their objective. I would assume it is. And there's some gains going on further down south here, but not too sure about the exact mapping around Kupiansk, Avdivka, Klishchivka, and elsewhere. And that is where we're at in the Bakhmut area. I don't think, again, it's a particularly great day for the Ukrainians, as in they are getting a lot of pressure from up north. It's just what they can do in retreating. Can they bleed the Russians as much as they can? Can the Russians, will it only be a Pyrrhic victory? And thus, stopping the Russians from continuing their momentum until they get, reinforcements, until they can reconstitute their forces. Just before we go further down south, this is your overall map of what's going on in Bakhmut. I mean, goodness, pressure everywhere. And you can imagine that is a pretty good tactic for the Russians, which is, the Ukrainians just on the back foot everywhere. And they're pressure to find that weakness. And once they find that weakness, it's piled into that crack to open it up to make it a larger fissure. As we come down further down south to Avdivka, there is pressure all around the south and the southwest of Avdivka. Interestingly, the ISW says that Russian offensive operations southwest of Avdivka were aimed at preventing Ukrainian counterattacks, according to a Russian source. So they're attacking there to stop the Ukrainians attacking. Andrew Perpetua just shows that all down between Avdivka and Marinka, the Russians are pressuring, but it's fairly stable. That includes Krasnohorivka, Pervomaysky, Vodyany, Nivelsky, just south of Pervomaysky. On my map, that would look like this: Pervomaysky, Vodyany. You got Nivelsky, which is this tiny settlement there. Lots of entrenchments around here, lots of trenches and fortifications that the Ukrainians hold, which is why it's difficult for the Russians to progress around there. Krasnohorivka and down to Marinka. Certain Russian source says that Ukrainian forces were fleeing their positions in Marinka. Take that with a pinch of salt. Not sure that is actually happening. Andrew Perpetua says that the situation around Vuhledar has mostly died down. There are small positional battles, so you can see no kind of real arrows of pressure there, other than up in Marinka where we just were. So then we get to the one other piece of news, which is in Velika Novosilka. So here it is: Russia is attacking Velika Novosilka, but it's heavily defended. It's unlikely anything will happen there. That is a kind of, you see that in ISW as well. The repelled attack there, but other than that, it's fairly quiet along the Zaporizhia front. Finally, just a short thing to say on the Khinburn Peninsula area. So this is just south of, or southwest of Kherson, south of Mykolaiv. This peninsula and spit area that sort of flits in and out of the news. The situation on the Khinburn Spit remains difficult due to weather conditions, says Natalia Humenyuk. The operational situation is that the enemy from time to time moves to a position from where it fires at the opposite bank, but it is constantly prevented from staying there by our counter battery work. And that's why this work is not yet finished, because the weather conditions are difficult. Ochakiv residents of the Kutsurub community should be very attentive and listen to the air warning signals, Humenyuk said, which is interesting because I think this admits that there aren't forces on the peninsula, that this is just an artillery duel. Our work isn't finished yet. In other words, we haven't taken out all their artillery here. We're trying to take it out with counter battery fire, but it doesn't seem to suggest that there are actually forces working on the peninsula. And because we've had sort of those sort of claims off and on for some time, and some people just saying, no, there's no one there. Others saying, yeah, there is work ongoing there and there's operational security. Just unsure. But that certainly indicates that there might not be people Ukrainians operating on the Khinburn Peninsula. Anyway, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for all your support. Really appreciate that. Sorry, again, it's a longer one because Bakhmut takes up so much time. If you want to give it a good explanation, but hopefully catch you later for a Ukraine War Update extra video.